Hi everyone, it's Laura Volpes for Studio Katia, and in today's video I'm going to share with you how to create this fun Halloween card with die cuts only, so there is no coloring skills required to create this card. The products that I used for today's card are the pumpkin shaker die, the dotted Slimline set 2 dies. I also used the spiderweb shaker die, the MEOWY Halloween stamp set, and lastly the spiderweb stencil. As a first step, I went ahead and off-camera die cut some colored cardstock in purple and green using the dotted Slimline set 2, and now I'm going to do some ink blending on both panels. I started from the purple one and I decided to use the spiderweb stencil to create a fun pattern. I used pixie spray to add a little bit of tack to the stencil so that it wouldn't move. I usually use my Make Art station, which has these nice magnets that hold stencils and cardstock in place, but because the spiderweb stencil is so fine, I thought that using the pixie spray on top of that would make the whole thing more sturdy so that I can get a nice and crisp impression, which is what happened, as you can see here on camera. I'm using Distress ink in Wilted Violet and my blending brushes by Studio Katia, and I'm going all around the edges here to create some shading and also add the spiderweb pattern to the background. I'm not bothering with the center because I know that that part will be covered by another panel, which is my green scalloped rectangle panel. To darken up this background here, I'm also coming in with Distress ink in Black Soot and going again all around the edges. There is a little bit of a splotch there on the bottom left, but it doesn't matter because it will even not be visible in the final result. As you can see, I'm not going for a very smooth blend to begin with, so if the blend is not perfect, it really doesn't matter. On the contrary, it adds to the look of the card. I'm also going to add a few droplets here using again Distress inks in the colors Wilted Violet and Black Soot. I just pressed the ink pads on my glass mat, I activated the inks with some water, and then I created droplets with a paintbrush. I used a small paintbrush so that the droplets would be really fine because that's the look I was going for. Next, I moved on and basically repeated the same steps on this green panel. This time I'm using Lucky Clover and then pine needles to create some nice depth, and I'm also leaving the center of the panel as is, so I'm sort of getting this fade into the natural color of this cardstock, and using blending brushes really helps with getting these kind of smooth gradients, although as I said it really doesn't matter for today's card because if you have a bit of a splotchy ink blending, it kind of creates that hazy feel that is great for Halloween cards. Also in this case, as you can see, I came in with Black Soot Distress ink to darken up the edges and create even more contrast and color depth in my panel, and as I did earlier, I am going to create some droplets with pine needles, Lucky Clover and Black Soot Distress inks. Here's the second panel for my card base and I really love the look, and at this point I can put this aside to dry and start working on my focal point. For this card, as I said, there is not going to be any coloring or any stamping except for the sentiment, and my focal point was created with the pumpkin shaker die by Studio Katia. You can create a pumpkin or turn it into a jack-o'-lantern, which is what I'm going to do today. I die cut my pumpkin out of some orange cardstock, and you can see that I obtained two die cuts. One is kind of a frame in case you want to turn this into a shaker, and the other is the body of the pumpkin. I used Ripe Persimmon and Black Soot Distress inks to add some shading to the pumpkin, and then I'm also using additional dies in the set to create some decorations for the pumpkin itself. I cut a leaf, one little swirly thing whose name I'm sorry I don't know, and I also cut out the stalk here of the pumpkin out of some green cardstock. I trimmed off the excess, and then again I'm going to add a little bit of blending to them using pine needles and Black Soot Distress inks. Next, I created the eyes for my jack-o'-lantern here, and I die cut them out of some dark gray cardstock and added some shading with Distress ink in Black Soot. You could also directly cut them out of some black cardstock or even out of some yellow cardstock if you wanted it to look as if the pumpkin was glowing. Another fun thing you could do is to add some LED lights at the back and turn this into an interactive card, and I may just do that in the future, I'm not sure. I then decided to go for an inlay die cut effect, so I die cut the eyes and the mouth out of the main body of the pumpkin as well. I put some washi tape at the back, and I also added a few dabs of my Studio Katia glue in the openings, where I then went ahead and nested the eyes and the mouths of my pumpkin, and I think the result is really fun. To finish it off, I also adhered the stalk, this little swirl here. Please let me know what the name is in the comments, and the leaf. I adhered the leaf so as to cover the base of the stem or stalk so that it would hide any imperfection that was due to the fact that I kind of hand cut the bottom of the stem. Since I was having so much fun with this card, I decided to add more and more decorations to it. So I die cut 2 spider webs, again out of dark grey cardstock using the spiderweb shaker die by Studio Katia. I positioned them on the front of my card so that I had an idea of where I wanted them to be, and then I die cut them with the same scallop rectangle die that I used for the card panel, and this way everything is nice and seamless. You could skip this step and just trim off the excess with your scissors, but I liked the more kind of neat and, if you want, precise look, but it's totally up to you. In order to add even more interest to this panel, I decided to do a little bit of tone-on-tone stamping, so I took the images from the MEOWY Halloween stamp set and I stamped them randomly on the background using Lucky Clover Distress ink. Distress inks are not meant for stamping, so you will not get a precise result with them, but that was kind of the point. I didn't want this to be super neat, and that's why I used Distress ink in Lucky Clover rather than Distress oxide, which I would have used if I wanted to have a more neat result. As I said, this is a Halloween card, so if things are not super precise, I think it really adds to the overall feel of the project. One thing that I wanted to mention about the spider webs is that I did ink blend them with Distress ink in Black Soot and Whipped Cream White Pigment ink by FSJ. Unfortunately, the camera didn't pick it up, but that's why you can see that there is a little bit of shading on the die cuts. It's nothing fancy or nothing that I haven't shown so far, it was just a little bit of ink blending with my Distress ink in Black Soot in the center and the white pigment ink on the outside portions of the spider webs. Next, it was time to adhere my focal point here, and I glued down the center of the pumpkin first and the frame afterwards, and I really love the look of this die cut with the frame like that. I think it's really unique. The sentiment comes from the MEOWY Halloween stamp set, and I decided to do some heat embossing to add a little bit more texture and shine to the card. So I stamped it with VersaFine Nocturne Clear black ink, and I coated with clear embossing powder and then melted the embossing powder with my heat gun. At this point, it was time to mount my front panel on the card base, and to do that I decided to use some black foam tape by Studio Katia, which adds just a little bit of dimension to the project. It's time for the finishing touches now, and for that I used a glitter brush pen by scrapbook.com to coat the eyes and the mouth of the pumpkin as well as the spider webs. This is going to add some subtle shimmer to the card, which is a lot of fun. I then picked up a tip that I saw in a video by Pink and Peppermint Cards, where she used a black glaze pen to add some accents on black die cuts, and I did that to sort of accent the eyes of the pumpkin, and I really loved the look. And then of course I did have to add some blink, and I used some exotic ONYX pearls as well as some amethyst and SEAFOAM pearls by Studio Katia. Here's a close-up look at the final result. I really loved creating this card and I loved the way it turned out, and because it features pretty much die cutting only, this would be also a great project for those who don't really enjoy coloring. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe to the Studio Katia channel for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. As always, thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.